I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf, and welcome to my podcast, Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about bullying. It's such a topical thing, and it's a problem. And as we know, some social situations require a lot of advocacy and intervention, and bullying is one of those things that does require this. According to some recent statistics, globally, 1 in 3 children have been bullied in the past 30 days. 1 in 3 children have been bullied in the past 30 days. Young children exposed to bullying can suffer educational, social, and health consequences, which often last well into adulthood. See, bullying is actually a form of trauma that is closely intertwined with the child's identity by the one who's doing the bullying and the one who receives the bullying. And this is unfortunately something that many children experience and participate in. But there's always a root cause of why the bully is doing what they are doing, and then the impact on the child who's being bullied, that will change their behaviors. And people often ask me, what are the signals to look out for bullying? One of the main signals to look out for is a change in your child, a change where they wanted to go to school, now they don't want to go to school. Or they had a certain friend that they liked and they didn't have now that they don't like that friend anymore. Or they used to want to go to the park and now they don't want to go to the park. So any pattern change where they used to like something and they didn't and they don't anymore. And also things like change in sleep, nightmares, and increased levels of anxiety, maybe withdrawing, so starting to seem more depressed. And then also behavioral changes like maybe bullying a sibling. Maybe they're being a bit harsh on, kicking, breaking plants or breaking toys. Things where you see this like buildup of energy that comes from a toxic experience like bullying, and then that exploding out in different situations at home. So anything that's abnormal to the behavior that is a change in their pattern, it's not what they normally do, and it's fairly destructive. It could also be some self-harm. There could be self-harm, cutting, things like that could also be a sign of bullying as well. So basically, this is a social situation that we really do need to intervene in. And parents, the other thing we need to remember as parents is that bullying doesn't just stop when you go home from school. Now with social media, bullying goes home with the child. So it's there with them right up until when they put their phone down. And so that just makes it so much longer and more difficult. So what can we do? 3 things that we can do to help with this. And the first thing is to be preventative and proactive. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit of detail. Secondly, get help from the community. And thirdly, help your child with the negative mental effects of bullying. Okay, so the first thing, let's talk about being preventative and proactive. As your child is starting school, now with school almost on us again, let them know that sometimes other children won't like them. Sometimes other children will be horrible to them. Sometimes other children may not want to be their friend. And sometimes other children do pick on other children. So, be prepared, set them up with the scenarios, explain that to them, that it's not something wrong with them if someone doesn't like them or doesn't want to be their friend or starts picking on them. It's because not everyone does like us, and because people are showing up in the way that they are because of what they are going through. Doesn't make the bullying right. But if your child knows it's not something about them internally, themselves, then you can proactively and preventatively help them to understand that if I am being picked on and it's making me feel bad, it's not something wrong with me. It's something that is something that the bully is actually going through and they're taking it out on me, but it's not something wrong with me. And also just a realization that not everyone will like you. So preparing them in that way helps to have a bit of mental resilience and mental preparation. Also opens the door for them to be a bit more open to talking about this and collaborating. The reason children often keep quiet when they're bullied, and you just see the behavioral symptoms, is because there's a lot of attack on the child's identity by the bully. A lot of attack on how they are, their value. They'll be told that you're useless, you're bad, you're a waste of time, things that they generally have been told by a parent or a sibling or a situation in which they take that out onto the child. But it's a direct attack on their self-identity. So if we can preventatively and proactively tell a child that you are great, that you are, everyone's great, everyone's wonderful, but not everyone's going to like you. And yes, you make a mess, and sometimes you do this and that, and the whole concept of messiness. But deep down at the core of who you are, I love who you are. Who you are is great. And through the rest of your life, you're going to be growing that. But not, so when someone says something to you that makes you feel bad about you, you need to remember that that's not necessarily true. And if you can give the child that kind of knowledge that they know it's not me, it's something that is happening to me by someone who has something happening to them. That's very helpful in terms of proactivity and preventative. Also, just remind them how bullying can happen online as well. And if you can ask them questions like, if they're on their social media and you see that they read something and then they look really upset, that's an opportunity for you to be able to connect and sit and talk to them and say, is someone saying something horrible to you on social media? Do you want to share that with me? Should we talk about how it makes you feel and how it's making you feel in your body? And let's talk about, this is happening. What can we do about this? In a safe, creating a safe environment that they feel that they can share it with you. So by talking to them about bullying is also being proactive. You might actually end up helping them have the courage to actually ask for the help. So what we want to do is, if we talk about bullying, talk about scenarios, to give examples of in your own life, if you were ever bullied, maybe tell stories that you've heard, or if there's someone in your family, tell them about bullying, talk about how it feels, what it does, so that they understand that this is not something, as I keep saying, that's about them and them alone. So the next thing that I want to talk about is to get help from the community. Okay, bullying prevention is really a community effort, because it's not just that person who's bullying is going through something. So and then the impact is affecting so many people. So it often requires parents talking to teachers talking to other parents of the particular children involved, and as a connected community, there's a whole discussion that is happening. So it really does take a village to resolve this. Parents, teachers, therapists, psychologists, physicians, school administrators, coaches, school counselors, basically the whole home and whole school type approaches. So therefore, bullying isn't just a school thing. It can happen after school as well. We need to remember that as well with the online bullying. And then also encourage your child to participate in school activities, other activities that can help them to connect with other children and to have more fun and to be able to talk about things. Specifically encourage your child to participate in sports and other activities so that they have the chance to maybe make better friends. And also there's the peer support. So often we hear stories of how a child's going through something, and by talking to a peer or a new friend or being able to text that friend, it helps them to manage that situation. So they can go to a friend and say, this is happening to me, is it happening to someone else, and what do you do? And this one's saying this, and they help each other. Peer support's incredible. And that's where social media can be really great, because it gives a child a chance to text their friend or the new friends they've made or their other friends, and they can talk amongst each other, and sometimes they can form their own little sort of coalition to try and help with that situation. And when they're at school, then they've got a team of people that they could potentially go to for support. So the other side of the coin is once you do as a community approach the teachers and the teachers start observing the situation, it can boomerang back on the child, because maybe that bully's got a network of other bullies or people that follow him or her. And then, they hear that they get called in and they get spoken to, and then they pick on that bully and isolate that bully. They isolate the child who was bullied, the group of bullies, and so on. And so that can have that boomerang effect. So it's really important that in terms of that, it takes a community, takes a village, to make sure that when you do talk to the relevant teachers, etc., to have that in mind and think about how we could have a protection in place. So it may be that you need a bit of someone monitoring the situation or watching very closely, or making sure that there isn't an opportunity for that child to find or a group of children to find that child isolated, maybe walking home from school or at certain parts on the playground. Just to give you this quick story of one of my patients who was getting all the changes in pattern, not sleeping, behavioral issues, academic issues, battling to concentrate. And when we started talking about this to the child, it turned out that the child was suffering from bullying. There was a new child in the school, and he was bigger and stronger, and picked on this child who was much smaller, typical sort of situation, quieter, liked to read a lot. And then the big sister of the child who was being bullied saw what was happening and went and kind of attacked the bully, and then it became a whole thing, and the teachers got involved, and at first the sister got into more trouble than the bully because the truth wasn't told, but then there were a couple of more incidents, and the bully managed to cover his tracks. So the fact that the big sister actually kind of pushed the child away and there was some physical contact, the big sister got into trouble. Long story short, more incidents started happening, more parents started speaking up, and then the teachers started monitoring the situation, watching very closely, not letting this particular child isolate other children. And then eventually they saw the things happening, brought the child in. It was getting pretty violent. The child, as the days wore on, the bully was starting to hurt not just this one child who was my patient, but also other children. And long story short, they were called in. It was really a sad story because the bully was being badly abused by the father, and told all these terrible things and how useless and everything. And so exact thing that the father was doing to the bully was doing to the children on the playground, and kind of honing in on the child with the characteristics of how that child felt at home. And so it was a transference of energy because that child didn't know how to process it and so on. And so what was done was the child was obviously called in. Child went into the counselling with the school counsellor. The parents were called in. The child actually had to be removed from the parents because it was quite extreme, and put in foster care and stayed at the school, but got a lot of therapy and things changed. So that was a happy story at the end. But it took a bit of time. It took a community. It took a plan. It took a lot of intervention. Okay, and then the third thing is if your child has been bullied or is being bullied, there are going to be negative mental health effects. As I mentioned in the beginning, there are those signals. And it's very important when you help your child is to emphasize that, let them know that the bully is the one who's actually got the problems, and they're taking that out on them, and it doesn't make it easier for the child, but that certainly will help them not think it's themselves, and they'll have more strength and may be able to then have the correct words to be able to say back to the bully. And that's also part of helping them, is going through, you can use a neurocycle, for example, to go through the whole process. And when you get to the active reach, is actually having statements that could work and could help, in a plan in place that you practice with that child. Even setting up scenarios of potential bullies, or the potential bullying situation and the words that are said. And, even if they can't tell you the scenario, you can create a scenario and practice that with the child so that they can practice building those skills and getting the confidence to be able to go to a teacher, move away, say certain things back, that kind of thing, to protect themselves. You can also help them. It's really important to constantly reaffirm that how your child is showing up in the moment as a result of bullying is not who they are, that that even though maybe they're being difficult, maybe they're hitting a sibling. Another example of someone recently speaking to me about how their very calm, happy child just suddenly came home and started being very nasty to the sibling and hurting the sibling and so on. And it turned out that was a bullying situation. There was a change in pattern, change in behaviors. And when they went and approached the teacher at the school, they found out that there was a bullying situation happening, and they could manage to resolve it as a community. So what she said to her child, as this child who was normally very gentle and played nicely with his brother, was suddenly hitting his brother, she pulled him away, said, "You can't hurt your brother," and took him through a neurocycle, saying, "Look, I understand that you're hitting your brother, that you're very angry, and I understand that this is not who you are. This is how you're showing up because something's going on. So let's talk about how you're feeling. Let's talk about this, but before we do that, you can't hit your brother. That's not the way to solve the problem. So your brother's upset, so let me help your brother, and then I'm going to sit and help you." And in that way, you validate the child's experience. You help them know you're going to help them process what they don't know how to process. You help the child who has been hurt, and in that way, there's a collaboration and lessons, all kinds of lessons that are learned. So in conclusion, there's 3 things that we can do the broad things that we can work on is be preventative and proactive, firstly. Secondly, get help from the community. It really takes a village. And thirdly, help your child with the negative mental effects that bullying can have on them by working through the process of using something like the neurocycle, and get a therapist as well if necessary. But it's really important for that child to process and build skills to be able to do that. In South Africa, when I still lived there for 25 years, I worked in schools there, and there was a huge bullying problem in all the schools. I worked in poorly performing schools, very poverty-stricken schools, very wealthy schools, and it was consistent across all schools. So what we did was a sort of 2-prong approach. where we worked with children individually to use the neurocycle to manage their emotions. So we taught them as a group how to deal with things that were going on in their life. We also helped them use the neurocycle in their learning. So they were using, because you can use the neurocycle to learn. So it's building the brain. We use it to build positive things in the brain, like how to build gratitude and how to capture a moment that's happy and build that into the brain, because that builds a lot of resilience and builds a lot of wisdom and insight. It helps to facilitate a lot of wisdom and insight. And at the same time, we taught them the skills of how to manage their emotions. And then what we did, that was done as a collective group. And in those that were being bullied, there was a lot of close observation. And then we would see who the bullies were and who was being bullied. And we would then call them in separately and work through the issues separately. But like I explained with the story of the two brothers, the one who had been bullied and was normally gentle and was hurting the brother and that kind of thing. So to work with them each individually, explain the impact so the bully understands the impact, make sure that the bully understands where the source is, working through the process to understand that that's also not who they are, but how they're showing up because of, and then helping the impact of the child's who's been bullied's mental health, because that really does impact the way that the child sees their identity. That's a really big, very, very big part of being bullied, is that feeling of I have no value and I'm useless because of all these so-called weaknesses inside of me. So it's really important to rebuild that healthy network. And neurocycle is fantastic for doing that, because it's changing the whole psychoneurobiological network. So in doing this, we found that the students became empowered. And this is the big key thing. You want to empower the child being bullied and the bully to embrace, process, and reconceptualize how they felt about themselves, both the bully and that bullied, which helped them address the things like the emotional neglect, the unmet needs, and the identity issues that had resulted from the bullying that both parties were receiving. So this in turn developed the child's sense of empathy. You want to develop empathy, which will fantastic way of really moving towards controlling the bullying, and also recognition of their impact on others. So the bully being bullied was bullied, and that the one who gets bullied tends to bully. So it kind of creates this whole chain reaction. So it's to teach both about identity and impact and find the root cause, and then to have the skills and the tools to be able to then, with the help of the community, to manage the situation. Well, thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.